Hello everyone, those who are attending today and those who are going to be watching the recording on our YouTube channel or finding us via our Institute for Northern Studies web pages. Welcome to today's third, well, it's not the third today, but today's Islands Matter webinar, which is the third of 2025. And the Islands Matter webinars are where we explore interesting and important island-focused research. Some of the research is undertaken by researchers within the UHI. Other bits of research are done by people based in other universities who are doing exciting things that have relevance for us living in islands. And today I'd like to introduce Chiara Cocco. Chiara has a PhD in social sciences from Heriot-Watt University, and her thesis is what's going to form the basis of her talk today. Her thesis was titled Performing the Festival, an experiential autoethnography of the Festival of Sant'Efisio in Sardinia, and it was nominated for the Macfarlane Prize. Chiara is currently a postdoctoral research associate at Heriot-Watt University, where she's exploring the relationships between life events and career, addressing barriers to inclusion, development, and progression for commonly marginalized and underrepresented groups in research and innovation careers. Her research interests and expertise also lie in ethnographic methods, particularly autoethnography. But today, she's going to talk about the research that she undertook for a PhD and explore the Festival of Sant'Efisio, which has been celebrated and performed for 368 years to fulfill a vow in honor of the martyr of Saint Efisio. So the importance of festivals is very clear for island communities. Here in Shetland, of course, we have our Aphelia events, which are very important for the community, bringing everybody, well, it doesn't bring everybody together, but it brings a lot of people together and is also important for tourism. So it's always very interesting to hear about festivals that are important for other island communities. So with that, thank you very much indeed, Chiara, for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrew, for this lovely introduction, and thank you for inviting me to talk to this event. Thank you all for listening, and for those who are present and for those who will be listening later on. I'm really happy to be here and talk about my PhD, as this is not what I researching anymore at the moment. So it is always a nice opportunity when to just talk about my PhD research and festivals and islands. And today I'm going to be talking about one area that I have explored throughout my study, and that is the performance of Sardinia and Sardinianness in the Festival of Sant'Efisio. This is just to give a kind of overview of the PhD project and what I looked at. So the project considers festivals as sites of transformation, adaptation, and negotiation for the communities interacting with their social environment. I employ a case study strategy by looking at the Festival of Sant'Efisio and exploring the Festival of Sant'Efisio, which is one of the most celebrated and popular and famous events in the island of Sardinia. And for those who don't know, Sardinia is an island of Italy, and I'm going to be talking about that soon. The study is placed within an interpretive phenomenological framework, which is underpinned by a feminist approach throughout. And I employ performance as the key theoretical lens to inform the analysis of the socio-cultural issues that I find most interesting for my study and for my own interest within the Festival of Sant'Efisio, which are the display of cultural heritage, community construction and conflict, and gendered practices within the festival. The study is based on ethnographic fieldwork, and which has taken place both online and in person. The online part wasn't really envisaged, but at my second year of the PhD, which was going to be my fieldwork year, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. So I had to move my study online, which actually brought very new, interesting perspectives to the fore. And then I've done my in-person fieldwork 2 years later, because the festival actually hadn't taken place in its normal public fashion for 2 years, 2020 and 2021. So I was able to attend it again in 2022 and do my in-person fieldwork then. So what I wanted to investigate were the effects of social and cultural transformations with relation to the issues that I mentioned within the Festival of Sant'Efisio, and had addressed how the festival is interpreted, experienced, felt, and performed by the people involved. And my own perspective and experience as a researcher is also very central to this inquiry, and is discussed by means of autoethnography. And this is why the whole thesis really centers the experiential side of the festival, both from my point of view and the perspectives of the participants. Just a background on the festival itself. So it originated from a vow that was made by the city of Cagliari, so the municipality of Cagliari, in 1652 to Saint Efisio, which is a Christian martyr of the Roman Empire. And that was a vow made in response to the plague that at that time was decimating the Sardinian population and the Cagliari population in particular. And because the plague was actually ended at some point, the vow was honored for 368 years now, with a solemn feast and a procession in honor of the saint. So the feast lasts between the 25th of April to the 25th of May, so a whole month of feast. And a procession takes place from the 1st of May to the 4th of May. And there is also a big cult around the figure of Sant'Efisio in the city of Cagliari in particular, but also around Sardinia. The festival is quite complex, and it involves a wide range of cultural and social actors, such as the municipality of Cagliari, which is responsible for the vow, but also the Brotherhood of Sant'Efisio, Arciconfraternita di Sant'Efisio, and the folk groups, the devotees, and it also includes 5 municipalities that are situated in the diverse geographical context and also landscape. So because the processions, this procession that lasts for 4 days from the city where Efisio lives in the center of, in the old town of Cagliari, to the place where he was believed to have been beheaded, which is around 40 kilometers out of Cagliari and back. The procession, this procession/pilgrimage involves these 5 municipalities, and it goes through different landscapes, from the urban cityscape of Cagliari to the seascape of the coast, and also countryside villages. It is a major attraction in Sardinia. People come to see it from all around Sardinia, but also beyond. It's been promoted and as a cultural event through tourism strategies, and I'm going to be talking about that as well. It's called in different ways: feast, sagra, parade, procession, pilgrimage, and now is even called Camino, because the region, Sardinia, has actually organized a route of the Camino of Sant'Efisio to be visited out with the festival period. So I was interested in understanding how the Festival of Sant'Efisio has transformed in the years, and what these transformations tell us about the wider social environment in which the festival takes place. The analysis centers the performance of various cultural aspects in the festival and how they are negotiated and interpreted by the different key actors, as there are many of them. And I think that these elements illuminate what Magliocco calls the politics of festivals, which are defined as the effects of social transformation on traditional festivals and the performance of local issues within the festival context. So I really want to explore how these aspects relate to the Festival of Sant'Efisio and how they have developed, they have transformed, or at times remained unchanged throughout the history, throughout the centuries in history, and why. So as I said before, the Festival of Sant'Efisio is a complex cultural and religious event where traditional customs are performed and exhibited as a component of Sardinian identity. So I thought it is a very appropriate avenue to observe some of the dynamics between Sardinian and mainland Italy as well, particularly in relation to the perception and representation of Sardinian culture. And I really want to explain why, and I believe that there is a controversial and unbalanced relationship between Sardinia and Italy that impacts the general perception of Sardinian identity, both from outside and from within the island. And this consideration that I make also inform later on the analysis and how I understand how Sardinian tradition is interpreted and experienced and performed in the Festival of Sant'Efisio by those who are involved. So the analysis of festival is a tool to understand the processes of cultural construction and reproduction amongst communities. And in the case of Sardinia, it is also helpful to understand how Sardinian communities engage both with mainland Italy and the outside world through the display of culture. And Sardinia, being an island, determines a physical and a symbolic separation from the mainland and the continent, which results in a perception of separateness that can form the basis for identity-founded feelings of individuality and community, as Ronstrom mentioned. And I believe that Sardinian's condition of islandness needs to be considered when exploring the performative aspects of the Festival of Sant'Efisio. And the stereotyping around islands are also important to take into account because islands are often associated with folklore and make-believe as opposed to efficiency and pragmatism, a description that is further encouraged in mainstream island tourism strategies. And these representations are particularly reinforced and supported from within the islands. For example, this text that I'm about to read is found in the webpage from the tourist office of the Cagliari Council. So that is dedicated to the popular tradition. So popular tradition and historical remembrances represent an important testimony of a community. To commemorate some recurrences, often between sacred and profane, which is what Sant'Efisio, the Festival of Sant'Efisio is about, is to know better the identity of a territory. The rituals of faith in Cagliari are felt deeply by the community. And the Festival of Sant'Efisio is cited first, is the first one among the rituals taking place in the area of Cagliari, thus, which representing a crucial means of cultural identity. And local communities attempt to establish their own identity by safeguarding what they call tradition and culture through the performance of heritage, for example, at festival. And this is an attempt to maintain authenticity in the face of globalization while avoiding cultural homologation. So the public representation of the Festival of Sant'Efisio aims to serve this purpose. And there is a clear link between this cultural identity and also perception of authenticity, preoccupation with authenticity, I'd say. So this is another excerpt from a website called Sardinia Tourism, describing Sant'Efisio, which is called the Feast of Sardinia. And so it starts, a journey through the culture of a people between faith and authenticity. And this preoccupation with authenticity is quite important. It's something that I have found quite a lot in my fieldwork, talking to people. And I think it also enlightens to understand the fear of change, a resistance to change and transformation through culture as well. But in order to understand all these processes, it's important to kind of contextualize Sardinia and politically and in relation with Italy in this case. So Sardinia holds the status of Regione a Statuto Speciale, region with special statute. And its speciality derives from a variety of factors. Its ethnocultural aspects, such as distinctive language, tradition, and what Casula has defined as atypical and dissonant history. These elements, as well as the geographical and environmental features, are dissimilar, are different from the rest of Italy. And the condition of islandness plays a role in defining Sardinian political and cultural status, because insularity is not strictly related to geography, but refers to also how communities engage with their neighbors and interact with the outside world. So insularity contributes to shape the socio-cultural aspects of the island. And the same, I think, is true also about the sea. So the sea is a feature that is inevitably connected to islands and represents surely a geographical character, but also carries considerable historical and cultural values affecting the people from the islands and in Sardinia as well, and their relationship with each other and the outside world. And it's quite interesting here. I included an old saying, an old Sardinian saying about the sea, "Furat che viene de su mare," which means those who come from the sea come here to steal. So this kind of motto resonates with the history of multiple occupations that have shaped Sardinia throughout time. But also, it is recognized that the sea is a precious element that is celebrated and cherished by Sardinian islanders. And Baldacchino explains this ambivalence quite well, talking about the sea. The shoreline with a shifting pattern is a powerful draw, a source of psychological malaise, and often a keenly contested terrain. The all-embracing sea, while presenting dangers that occasionally lead to loss of life, is a source of sustenance as well as a medium of security from invasions. So the sense of distance and separation produced by this insularity and the sea affects the dynamics of identity construction and community belonging of the island with relation to the mainland. And this is also further justified by the special statute attributed to Sardinia. And however, this insularity and speciality shouldn't really be necessarily seen as negative. It should not be perceived as an escapable time trap, but also an opportunity for islanders to take their place in the contemporary global world. However, in the case of Sardinia, the unbalanced power relationship with mainland Italy has jeopardized the Sardinian development because those differences, those specific special traits, let's say, have been often employed as the basis for marginalization, discrimination, and cultural oppression. And I must say that besides being a region with special status, is also granted the status of autonomous region. But it's been observed that actually the autonomy in practical terms has never been truly achieved in the island because of the political and financial dependence on the national government. And this failure of the Sardinian autonomous status can be regarded as an aspect of the colonial relationship between Sardinia and mainland, which determines the island condition of subalternity and indicates how enabled the regional administration was to oppose and defy the process of cultural hegemony that is carried out by the unified Italian nation state. And I find it particularly fascinating that the concept of cultural hegemony was developed by a Sardinian person, Antonio Gramsci, that coined the term to describe the phenomenon through which those in power, the hegemonic class, manipulates and influences the masses in complying with their structures and aligning with the ideology and values, which is what really happened between Sardinia and mainland Italy through means of soft power. And the project of cultural hegemony is that it doesn't just come from outside, but it also has taken root from within the island and the population itself. And Onnis calls this process desardizzazione, desardization. Hopefully that makes it a bit clear, but it means that is the process of eradication of any form of cultural belonging, of Sardinian self-awareness, a program of forced acculturation through schools and mass media. So, as I said, this process has been able to thrive because of the construction of a certain imagery representing the island and Sardinian islanders throughout history. And one example comes from travelers coming to Sardinia and give an image of Sardinia and Sardinian people. And this is an example from one of the most quoted depiction of Sardinia, which is written by the English author and traveler D.H. Lawrence in his travel book Sea and Sardinia, which was published for the first time in 1923. Sardinia, which is like nowhere. Sardinia, which has no history, no date, no race, no offering. It lies outside the circuit of civilization. And I have read and seen this excerpt countless times on social media, posted by proudly by Sardinian people, and often accompanied by an image of a sea, of a beach, or mountains. And I did not think too much in the past. And probably looking back, I even thought it was cool that some famous author believed that Sardinia was so unique, like nowhere, you know? And it may be true after all, as Baldacchino argues. Some islanders might be silently thankful that even a perverse interest by the international community is better than no interest at all. But obviously now I see this quotation quite disturbing and offensive, really. And throughout the chapters of Sea and Sardinia, which Lawrence wrote after a journey of less than 10 days, Sardinia and our people are often portrayed as strange, bare, dreary, impudent, passive. And there's really no voice of them. Their voices is mainly dismissed and misrepresented through the author's biased and racist lens. And this type of narrative has been really carried out through travelers and researchers and other people, and also people from within. And although this narrative, this kind of Oriental lens might have taken a more subtle form, still continue to dangerously pervade the overall debates on tradition, especially, and contributes to the construction of an imagined Sardinianness through what has been defined as a mythopoiesis, so a kind of creation of a myth around Sardinia. And this is a tendency to kind of cling to a mythicized past, romanticizing and creating an idealized history. And this is sometimes what is left to population to compensate as a sort of defense mechanism, the forces of cultural oppression. And what makes this phenomenon contradictory and interesting and ambivalent is that those traits that, you know, of backwardness, of isolation, are those that actually are the features that are expected to be displayed, performed, and celebrated in public festivals and celebration. And this is very true in the Festival of Sant'Efisio as well. I noticed that as well. That is marketed for the tourist as La Festa della Sardegna, representing the culture and identity of the whole of Sardinia. And this can be found in a lot of web pages around promoting tourism in the island. And they are accompanied by images of people wearing Sardinian traditional clothes from the 17th century. And they shape the expectations that outsiders have of Sardinian people and expect to have with Sardinian communities. So the safeguard, in a sense, and promotion of cultural heritage is not always beneficial to the local communities. And because they are crystallized in an idealized past, which might count as protection, but it is not justice. And this is what I found also by interacting with with people in my field work. And again, that links a lot to discourse around authenticity. So when I spoke to people that are involved in a festival, especially the ones in official capacity, such as the municipality of Cagliari, the Brotherhood, and when I was interviewing somebody who worked was responsible for the organization of the procession and the selection of the folk groups that were to parade and walk in the procession, I was told that authenticity is crucial for the selection of those who are allowed to be part of the festival. And they said, we want to avoid falso storico, fabrication of history. We don't call it Sagra anymore because it's not a food festival. We wanted to take it back to the original meaning of the procession. We have to clean the language related to it as well. We can't call the clothes costumi, costumes anymore. They are abiti tradizionali, traditional clothes, because costumes evoke the carnival more than the procession. The people who walk the procession are devoti in abiti tradizionali, devotees in traditional clothes, or comunità, communities. In the 80s, there has been a lot of promotion of the festival, and it was just filled with superfluous things as it was typical in that period. Now it's been cleaned and taken back to tradition. And I thought this statement was quite interesting because it kind of shows how authenticity is conceptualized and understood, and also it shows the actions that have been taken in order to preserve it. And Bendix noted how words such as purity are employed to define a morally and religiously suffused authenticity, and here it transpires quite well through this in the usage of the verb clean. And however, although these initiatives have been widely promoted in Sardinia, it doesn't seem that they really fully reflect the general sentiment from the local population. Because when I spoke to a few members of folk groups, the word costume was widely used to refer to the clothes that they collect, preserve, wear in special festive occasion. It was never mentioned as an offensive or ungenuine term. The same applies to the words sagra or sfilata, parade, which are still broadly used by the locals to describe the festival and the procession at the collateral events. So there has been clear efforts to establish a certain idea of what Sardinian tradition should look like and how it should be displayed publicly through festive events. And much importance is clearly given by the organizer, by the official, on specific norms and requirements with the aim of maintaining the validity of the festival, as well as like dignifying Sardinian people who perform in it. And personally, I find that in an attempt to discourage a generalized and stereotypical representation of Sardinia, new stereotypes are created and forced upon communities. So there is, I note this difference and tension about the value of tradition between social actors at different levels. And it's also worthwhile noting that the cleansing processes have coincided with the efforts to put together the application for inscribing the Festival of Sant'Efisio in the Intangible Cultural Heritage UNESCO list. And we should remember that these processes of bureaucratization of heritage are linked to national and nationalistic dynamics. So the sites are chosen by national government for nationalistic reasons. So it is probably not surprising that the Festival of Sant'Efisio, as of today, has not yet passed the stage of nomination at a national level. Again, just as an example of this relationship between Sardinia and mainland Italy. And all these dynamics, as well as this commitment to make a good impression, I think, fare bella figura in Italian, are related to the Sardinian condition of islandness again and insularity and how they shape the island's attitudes towards its own culture and identity. And it has been observed that the self-perception of islanders is influenced by the relation of the island with the continent and has been proved to be often based on dynamics of marginalization and power imbalance. So islanders, for example, might develop a deeply rooted perception of being behind, that what comes from without, and in particular from the mainland cities, is a priori better and classier, by idealizing urban and cosmopolitan context. And I have been guilty of it myself in the past, comparing my provincial lifestyle in Cagliari to more glamorous and modern cities such as Milan or London. And in relation to the Festival of Sant'Efisio and the surrounded cultural, traditional, religious practices, it's very challenging to keep young people passionate or even simply interested in participating. And the same feeling actually can be applied to the relationship that we have with our own language and how it developed over time, again, as a result of the dynamics that have explained so far. So Sardinian language is recognized as a minority language by the national legislation and by the Sardinian statute, although it's not declared as an official language in its own right. So in Italian, there is a difference between lingua and linguaggio. Lingua meaning an official and recognized language, and linguaggio more of a dialect. And Sardo, Sardinian language, does not hold the same status as Italian language. So it's a linguaggio, it's a dialect. And it's not taught in schools and mostly not even used publicly. It remains like a language that people talk in their family. It's private. And also from my memory, it's also something to be kind of ashamed of, the accent being recognized in Sardinian through the language. And that has inevitably had a negative implication on Sardinian population, which has been deprived of the right to communicate and simply being through his own language. And Sardinia has experienced the so-called, what Simon Mossa called the failed bilingualism, by never truly accepting the indigenous language throughout the project, again, of Italian unification. I noticed that there's a new recent interest in Sardinian language, and that is thanks to the activism from independentist movements. And also with relation to the Festival of Sant'Efisio, there are parts of Sardinian language to be included through prayers and songs that are exclusively performed in Sardinian language. And also I noticed that in TV's local TV, some programs are broadcasted in Sardinian, as well as also the Festival of Sant'Efisio. I noticed that, but there's still a long way to go. But anyway, I wanted to finish here with this note on language, and I hope I clarified a little bit how I think that in order to study the dynamics of the Festival of Sant'Efisio, such an important event in Sardinia, the dynamic of Sardinia being an island and the dynamic between Sardinia and mainland Italy needed to be discussed. So that's me.
Thank you very much indeed, Chiara. Yeah, what a fascinating talk and a fascinating festival as well. I just wondered, who is the, if islanders are performing their traditions and cultures in a festival, who are they performing for? Are they performing for themselves, or are they performing for other people?
That's a good question, because that would give you different answers according to who you're asking. So more and more people are very attached to Sant'Efisio in Cagliari, in Sardinia. So asking also, a lot of people participate, the devotees, even those who parade in traditional costumes, they say that they would do it as an act of faith for themselves. However, it is a big cultural event, and it is part of Sardinian political and tourist strategy in that sense. So it is promoted, and some people, it was actually very interesting talking to a woman my age, around 30, mid-30s, who is very passionate about traditional clothing and traditional Sardinian dances. And she doesn't really have much faith herself. and she performs, she parades in the procession nearly every year. And for her, there is a very connection between the traditional performance and the religion. Is like they feed off each other. If they exist because these festivals exist. If the festivals were not there for them to perform, then they would die. And the festivals use this cultural aspects to then survive themselves. So all these interconnection and relationships are very important as well. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's helping to build community, because that's what Aphelia does here. Certainly those who take part. But it's from the youngest to the oldest, and people have different roles, but they're all part of, brings everybody together in a way that just, I don't know, going to the theatre or watching a show, it doesn't. So that it's taking part is very important. So so how many people take part in this? How big is it, and what sort of effect does it have on the community in a bonding sense?
It is big. Now, I'm not really good with numbers. In terms, like, there over 1,000 people parading on the 1st of May in traditional costumes and traditional clothes. And then people who come and see it are hundreds of thousands. And then the fact that these the procession lasts for 4 days. So as I said before, the festival lasts for a month. Not very many people know that. The most popular and celebrated event is the 1st of May, the start of the procession. And that is in Cagliari, is the most sponsored one and advertised one. And a lot of people come in. There is the people parading in traditional costume. That's a structured and orchestrated parade. And then as soon as the carriage with the saint comes in, then is spontaneous procession of people joining in. And then who goes, and some people follow just certain parts of the route, and it's a route that is interrupted. So it's because it goes over 4 days, then it staggers. Definitely the 1st of May is the most attended, but more and more, because it's been promoted more and more, it's broadcasted in the local TV now for the for the 4 days. Before it was just the 1st of May, just in Cagliari. Now it's more and more. So definitely it is an event that bonds people together. And the thing is that because it has its root in a religious act, that was the thing that probably if it stayed that way only, that might have lost. And it has, in a sense, lost some engagement. That's why the Brotherhood of Sant'Efisio is the one that mostly is losing the new recruits, because it's more and more difficult to have people to join our religious organizations. Because the society is becoming more less more secular in this respect. But because other events are created and sponsored as well, we have more this what's the word, encouragement of this cultural aspects and more folkloric aspects, then we keep going. But then again, is the tension before, like, we don't want it to be too folkloric because it's an act of faith, it's a religious cult. So this is really like all the kind of dynamics that I was very interested in see, all these ambivalences as well between faith and not faith, and those who join and don't believe. I'm not a believer, but Sant'Efisio, and Sant'Efisio becomes a figure in itself that is transcend the saint. It's called Efisio. Most people call it Efisio, like one of us, like one citizen of Cagliari, and that's that relationship, and it becomes familiar. And this is why I chose the Festival of Sant'Efisio as well, because I'm from Cagliari, and Sant'Efisio and the Festival of Sant'Efisio has always been part of me. And although we're not a religious family, that was always something that we would engage with one way or another.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. There's a couple of questions here. I see Alex has asked, you might have mentioned this already, but perhaps you could tell us more about how the costumes are made. Are they produced for the festival, or are they sort of family heirlooms that people put on?
Yes, thanks for the question. Yes, they are not produced for the festival. Actually, that's again very much of an issue of authenticity. Is costumes that are preserved from the 17th, 18th century, that are preserved by families or by cultural association, and they are kept like this, and that is a very much like quality control on the material used, both in terms of costumes and also jewelry, gold. Everything needs to be original, and there are actually quite strict rules on how you wear them, because again, I think it was the same person who mentioned the statement that I shared with you, that said that before, we don't allow people to wear trainers with those clothes, or to wear gel or heavy makeup, for example, or certain haircuts, because we want to kind of reproduce and keep it as authentic as possible. But yes, the clothes are preserved. They're not made for it.
So there must be some really valuable costumes on parade then.
Costumes?
Yeah, there must be. Well, sorry, that's the wrong word, wasn't it? There must be some very valuable traditional dress on show then during the festival.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I did put some photos to show
Beautiful, yeah.
that as well, and not just that, but some of them parade on carriages. They called tracas, and again, they were basically the kind of 18th century version of camper vans. They hold everything. They come straight like this from the nearby villages, and they are all decorated very like traditionally with all the kind of leaves and flowers, and inside they hold bread and food, and people just sit there and parade, and they are carried by oxen. There's a lot of oxen also in the festival.
Wow. Okay. Sounds amazing. And Myraid has got a question here. It's a more sort of general question about Sardinia and identity. Do all Sardinians want autonomy from Italy, or are there mixed feelings about the relationship?
No, most Sardinians don't want autonomy from Italy. Actually, it's not. I don't think there's ever been a referendum, and there won't be any referendum. And actually, the independence-driven parties have never been really successful at all. And this is again quite an issue in terms of like, I think that relates also to what is internalized about the perception of the island, and most reasons I think is about what people think that Sardinia alone cannot achieve. Is like Sardinia cannot survive on its own, basically.
So is there a way then of, without seeking more independence or autonomy, is there a way of overcoming that kind of relationship that you talked about, where Sardinians feel embarrassed about, if that's the right term, about being Sardinian within the Italian state? How is there sort of movements to become proud Sardinians within Italy?
I think it's been more and more. I've seen it myself. When I was younger, it was a real what do you say, embarrassment, really, and the fact that Sardinian language was I wouldn't say like officially banned, but I didn't learn it. It wasn't spoken it wasn't spoken at home. It wasn't absolutely spoken at schools. It was just completely, there wasn't any sort of conversations. Then, and I now kind of think, like, when the shift has come, but more and more there's this, and sometimes like this sort of events are the way that people are showing. And today I can't think of words. I'm really sorry, I can't think of words in English.
Well, they're showing
Are
a
trying
pride
to
in culture,
to express and be proud of the Sardinian culture. But by talking to people who are actually in the space of like independent movements, and that is also like they find it a bit problematic on how this Sardinian identity is displayed. It's like it always kind of seems to relate only to that past rather than just see what Sardinians can be achieving right now, and can be displaying and can be now in a sense. So again, these are all interest aspects to look into if I've had more time and more resources to do that. That's
well,
something
you can
that
always
I'd
go
like to
back to it.
explore.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I was wondering, you've explained it so well, the importance for the community, for Sardinians, for Cagliari in this having this festival, the opportunity to show your own identity and your culture and bring out your best clothes and things. Did you ever find out, or have you asked people what the visitor experience is? These other people come to see it.
Yeah, it's something that probably in my first proposal, that is something that I wanted to look at, actually, to look at all the kind of perceptions from everybody. And then I obviously realized that it wasn't a very achievable project. And then I ended up focusing mostly on the city of Cagliari and on the people who are strictly involved. And the COVID pandemic did have a role in it. But I did speak to some visitors, and the perception, like it is really like people get very interested and very they love it. They love seeing all the colors. And I spoke to some people, and that's from Italy, that are Italian, maybe from Turin, it could be, or others that have made it their own tradition themselves, and now they have become attached to this tradition, and have and it has become their own family tradition, and always come and see it. So it is a phenomenon that it is an event that grabs you, I'd say, and as an outsider seeing it for the first time, it's quite powerful. And because I did also the whole, this was my more kind of theoretical kind of part of the thesis, but I did also have more the experiential account of the festival and how people feel, and this feeling of like not being able to describe how to what they feel. And it's something that was very recurrent. Like, it's difficult to describe. I don't know how, but Sant'Efisio is just Sant'Efisio, and just being very attracted and coming back again. So, and that again, it depends on which levels and which events you then attend, because obviously the first one looks quite, like the public event, the tourist attraction in a sense. But there are other events that are less known and less sponsored, more intimate, and they are also very special. And then some people who have managed to attend them for some reason just got very grabbed by it, even like emotionally and transcendently.
Well, that sounds like a very good place to stop. Moved by the transcendence of the event. And well, certainly I'm very fascinated by it, and that's you've added it to the list of things that I would like to experience. So one of these days I might make it over to Sardinia or Efisio.
Absolutely.
So yeah, fabulous. Thank you, Chiara, for a really eye-opening and interesting talk, and thank you also for tying it into sort of island studies, research, and some of the big names, Godfrey Baldacchino and Ove Runström, and people like that. That was really interesting. And also, I hadn't realised that Gramsci was Sardinian, so there we go. I've learned something important.
Oh, good, good. If there's a takeaway from today, absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, so thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we can be in conversations about things in future.
Absolutely, I would love that. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.